And just this last part that I wanted to read. After all, it's not what happened to you, it's how we deal with it.
And on that point, and I know I'm going like my ADD brain's taking us like on a sharp right turn here, but we're gonna do it.
Great.
I,
Let's do
I want to say like part of my frustration and like, and what it were not, and it's not just like, I know like what's coming down with the Trump administration and what MAGA extremists are trying to do. And like, but this is a problem that way predates like Donald Trump. Like it was happening. I mean, when I went to treatment, Obama was president, right? And like I, the lack of specialty, and the word we'll use, right, Carol, is culturally competent care for the LGBTQIA plus community is mind-boggling. Now, and let me, I will, and people will say, yeah, but like treatment is treatment, right? Like addiction treatment is addiction treatment. No, it's not. Like when I was thrown into an addiction treatment facility multiple times where, I was very at my most vulnerable, had been harmed. And I finally felt, I remember one time in the late 2000s, I think it was like 2009. I remember like this feeling of relief the first day I walked into treatment. I can remember putting my head down on the bed at the detox, being like, I'm safe and like I can do this. And like I had gotten dosed with like methadone, and I was like, Ryan's gonna do this. And I remember talking and like making friends and bonds with people as we do. And it was a all male unit that I was in. And then immediately feeling like this outcast when everybody, the culture of the center was like, girlfriend this, fucking this, like what, tell me about this experience or that experience, and spitballing all this stuff. And I immediately found myself like engulfed once again in having to like lie about who I am just to
it.
survive and feel like I was a part of, and not, and then completely shut down to be able to even talk to a therapist about it. Like, and the question never even came up. It was always like, so tell me about your home life. Tell me about your girlfriend. Do you have a wife? And like I'm like, oh, like okay, like yeah, I do have a girl. Like I mean, it was just like, so not that it did more harm, but it certainly didn't help. And I didn't leave treatment a free person inside. When I was able to like let go of that and be who I am, like, you know,
Mhm.
that was the difference for me.
Absolutely. You made a really great point, especially on how clinical staff presented themselves to you. And I remember doing a training during COVID, a support training, and in the back, it was actually through John McShin's recovery coach training. And in the back, he has the ACEs, right? And again, don't ask me. I'll post it on what the acronym for ACEs is, but it's basically, a series of questions for clinical people, to get a survey of, your demographics and your orientations and so on and so forth. And one of the persons that was non-binary taking the course, and she said, this shit is antiquated. This is so outdated. And even going into the first job that I had in a methadone clinic, I realized that this wasn't set up for us.
Mm.
These treatment modalities were not set up for this. A lot of them were treatment centers were really based off of the 12-step program, because if you walked into any lunch area or dinner area, that's what you saw on the walls. You saw the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. The H&I would come in, hospitals and institutions.
Yep.
And, your aftercare was like, get your court card signed or get your, go to this many meetings and 90
Yep.
meetings in 90 days. And everything was not person centered. We hear
Right.
that language now, person centered care, that structure. You know, and so what do you think is, what do you feel is that one of the biggest failures, though, in the treatment industry today?
Oh God. Whew. Okay. We could do like a whole podcast
But
series on this one, but I'll say to one of the biggest failure is I would say of the treatment industry, but of like the larger healthcare spectrum, right, is the inability to bring treatment into the 21st century, right? Which mean and I'll put that as a big bucket, right? That means evidence-based treatment, that means culturally competent treatment, that means multiple recovery pathways, that means for me being able to bring treatment into the primary healthcare setting, right? Where people, it's costs, right? It's ridiculous that, still today in 2025, going into 2026, when people, somebody says addiction treatment, it's still synonymous with like Sandra Bullock in 28 days, right? Like that is not that it does not have to be that way, right? Like it does not have to be that way.
like intervention and all those other.
Right, or intervention. Like, I mean, we now know that like substance use disorder happens on a scale, like many chronic diseases do, right? Like there's levels of severity. Like, yes, for some people, inpatient may be absolutely necessary and the best option for them. For some people, inpatient is not a good decision whatsoever, right? Some people it's outpatient. Some people can get treated with simply just buprenorphine or Brixadi or Sublocade or Suboxone, and they can do it from home, right? So I think the biggest failure there's a lot of failures and there's also a lot of progress like in the treatment paradigm, but I would say the failure exists on the healthcare system and I think society for failing to recognize the multiple paths to treatment that exist and how low those barriers could be. It really is when profit seeped in and kind of made it this model that's not necessarily based on evidence at all. It's based on what insurance will pay for, and it's based on money. That's where the biggest failure exists because, like, I think that people are like, how do we really make a big change here? I'm like, how you make a big change? It's like you get screenings in primary care offices and you get doctors trained up so that you could treat addiction in a primary care setting, or certainly not having to like refer them to somewhere that's going to cost $10,000 a month or 20,000 or $30,000 a month. I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah, no, again, such great points because when I think about the models that they've produced and some of them, I was just talking to somebody yesterday about daytop,
Mhm.
the daytop experience, put this person in the middle with a paper behind them that says stupid or something, some
Yeah.
degrading name, uh,
Yep.
have everybody, all their peers, literally attack them, and there's the counselor just sitting back and just observing. Well,
Mhm.
I don't need someone to observe me like in a petri dish and see what grows out of that. What I need is that person-centered care, but I need you to not put me in a cookie cutter, because my experience as a, wasn't the first time, back in 89 when I first went to my first treatment center, but I also too was coming off of heroin and it was giving nothing, zero, nothing. Oh, they wouldn't even give me an aspirin.
Yeah.
That was a 10-day detox in Paterson, New Jersey. So we know that, um, as people are coming into these spaces, we're seeing now like there's in-home care recovery, but that's still a private agency that does
It's
that.
a privileged agency, right? So it's like there's a certain level of degrees, there's certain degrees of privilege required to be treated in the United States. But that's also sadly so true for healthcare in general, right? Like your ability to live a healthy life depends on how privileged you are to receive the care that you deserve and the care that should be a God-given right, in my opinion.
And it also too, being an even in an outpatient program, I wasn't given medication. I was told, it secretly, oh, she must be medicating, looking for she's seeking medication. Later, I realized it was because of my ethnic
Of
background.
course it was, because you're talking about what, 1989? Okay, so we know when 1989 was and what was going on then, but you want to, I mean, and I explore some of this in my third book, Fentanyl Nation. You want to go back to like the 70s when we had all these dudes coming back from Vietnam. Nixon was like, get them all on methadone, like immediately. Like everybody gets on methadone. Like Nixon gets, a bad rap as he should for the war on drugs, but the initial phases of it was actually to treat Vietnam vets that were coming home and was like, get those, they're not addicts.
Yeah.
They're our fighters. They're our heroes. Get them on methadone, right? But when it comes to folks like you that look like you, Carol, it was like, nope,
Yep.
nope,
Yep.
nope,
Go out there and suffer as your friend did,
yep.
even though it was a different time, he's a different person, but at the same time is we're not treated like cancer patients or persons with a heart disease or diabetes, right? We're giving like a, 5-day treatment, and then kicked out the door, and
Yep.
that's what I hear in the crisis call center. It's last night I had someone who was looking just to get into a warming center. I couldn't even get him into a warming center that was open because they were all closed or all full. And it's just ridiculous. And he was 40 days sober,
Mhm.
and that's the heartache is that when people are actually trying, they are witnessing and acknowledging that, yes, I have a problem, but I need help. I can't
Yeah,
do this alone. We cannot
yeah,
do this alone. We need this together. So I'm
yeah.
just going to keep moving on because I know you have
Yes.
some appointments after this, but I want to really dive into the work that you did during COVID
Yeah.
with Purdue Pharma.
Mm.
And, as a victim representative in the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy, what shocked you the most from the inside?
Oh my gosh. Well, so much shocked me, but I'd say like the biggest frustration and what I was most surprised by, and I've written about extensively, was just how the disconnect between people and government and where priorities laid. So I went into the process thinking that government, being the federal government and state governments represented by the U.S. Department of Justice and state attorneys generals, were looking out for people's best interests. And that could have been further from the truth. If people's best interests meant a paycheck to their government, whether that be state or federal, to spend as they see fit, then yeah, you could say they were looking out for people's interests. But when it came to, my fight the whole time was, I'd say the same thing I've been saying for, 7 years, 6 years now. Um, the money, I think every single penny from that bankruptcy, at least, should have gone to individuals who were harmed by the company. Because that's how bankruptcy goes, is like those most harmed get paid out the most and get paid out first. But the governments stepped in, and you're talking about, 50 government, 50 states plus the federal government stepping in, each having their own claim, saying, no, we represent the people, and, our costs are more important than, payments to them because we're the ones who paid, lost money in Medicaid. We're the ones who pay for the cops. We're the ones who covered the hospital bills and all this bullshit. So they made an administrative claim on behalf of people, but at the end of the day, the people who were actually harmed, got peanuts. So, and this was that was what surprised me the most because of the positions that a lot of these government actors took in front of, the cameras and the mic. Like they always said they were there fighting for the people, and that was all bullshit. Like they were fighting for themselves. They were fighting for name recognition for their next election. They were fighting because it looked good on TV, and they were fighting because they were going to backfill things in the states where, they had lost revenue. And we're starting to see some of like our big fears coming true, on how some of these dollars are being spent today. And I, to the comparison though was, people will say, well, what's wrong with the states and the federal government getting money? There's nothing wrong with them. They should get money, but there's a lot of other ways for them to get money in other lawsuits where they are the only plaintiffs allowed in the case. Like the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy was the only venue really where individuals had the ability to file a claim as part of a class and have some power to actually get a chunk of money that they could share. And in any other bankruptcy, and I use this analogy, like if, let's say like in Boston, Massachusetts, if there was this rogue chemical company, and they were violating all sorts of safety rules. And as a result of them violating the safety rules, and they were money hungry, and so they cut all these corners to do this stuff, and they knew that they were cutting corners. And one day, the chemical company something explodes and the chemical gets everywhere and covers half of Boston. And 50,000 people end up, harmed or with cancer, or many of them die or something like that. And they go and they say, we're going to sue, the chemical company. And the chemical company has to go into bankruptcy because their liability is so high. Do you think the Attorney General of Massachusetts is going to step into court and say, pay me before you pay them? No, not at all. But they could get away with it in this because they could make the claim that we did this to ourselves, right? And then the state had to pay for our actions, and so like that was what was most surprising to me is what they were saying in the forefront versus what they were fighting for behind closed doors was night and day. And it was one of the reasons I wrote Unsettled, and I wrote Unsettled in real time from a place of extraordinary frustration in the middle of COVID while the case was going on because it was my only outlet. It was my
Right.
only outlet, and I knew, yes, the bankruptcy system sucks. And it is a greedy capitalistic system that it is built upon that favors corporations over individuals. But at the same time, my fight was that these people that are elected to represent us, Republicans, Democrats, I don't, it party had nothing to do with this. They were equally like, locked in arms to screw victims the whole
Over
time.
there.
Yeah, it was, I felt that if we didn't put it out there, um, the history will repeat itself. And, the book is as much about the bankruptcy system as it is about Purdue, because I sat out to write the book about Purdue and about how evil the Sacklers are. But I really discovered early on in the process, of me representing victims that, yeah, the Sacklers are evil, but like really what this fight is about is where's their money going to go? Because that's what we're fighting for right now is we're fighting over money and a melting ice cube of money the longer it goes on. And they didn't want anything to do with victims. They didn't believe that we deserved a cent.
The addiction recovery treatment field is a multi-billion dollar industry.
35 billion. Yep.
Multi-billion.
Yep.
Ooh, oh my goodness. I know we only have a couple more minutes, so I'm gonna like, point my
Let's
finger
do
on
it. Let's do a rapid
rapid
session.
call, questions.
Yeah.
Where am I gonna go? I don't think I'm gonna get too much into your new endeavor and your campaign, but if you can want to tap into that some of that, that would be one.
I'll say I'm running in 2026. I lost in 2024. I also, though, I thank God for the people in my life and like my own recovery journey, because like I've also learned that like, when things like that happen, you pick yourself back up, you keep going. I didn't plan on doing it again in 2026, but literally the moment that Donald Trump was sworn into office, like those first couple of months and what was transpiring. I don't care if the district is heavy Democrat or heavy Republican. I feel like if that's my way of resisting, right? Like I have, I have different, things that I believe I bring to the table, but I also think that each of us has a unique thing that we bring to this movement. And I just wasn't going to let that moment go by without standing. It's as much about fighting for what I believe in, but it's also equally about standing up and protecting what I believe this country is founded on and making sure that like we're standing up for folks who don't have a voice in this process right now. Um, and again, it's out of a lot of hope for what we can do, but there's a lot of frustration there too, because I think that there's something we all can do. And not everybody wants to run for office. Not everybody wants to start a movement. Not everybody wants to start a podcast. For some people, it could be just as easy as talking to your sister or your brother or your mother. Actually, that's the most impactful way, is talking to people in your own circle. But for me, I was ready to stand up and fight back. And
Yeah.
this is the best way I know how right now. And I'm going to give it my all. And you know what? I am completely in a place of acceptance around it of, you know, it's an election. Somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. But I'm going to fight like hell, you know?
And you get a message out there that it's uniquely yours
Yeah.
and that others still haven't heard, right?
Yeah.
And also the work that you have been doing over these years and all the time that I've known you is always that passion. You've always been passion driven. And especially now, it's so important because everything is breaking news, and it's not any good news.
Yeah.
We're hearing mainstream media meets, streaming media,
Yeah.
independent media, and there's a fight around that. When our listeners are going to see this podcast and feel they're overlooked, especially in these times, because we're so inundated. We're coming up at the holidays. I know Christmas is your favorite time of year. I haven't gotten my tree yet, but I have my friend coming over the next a couple days to help me put up my little tree. But what would be the first step into advocacy that you would suggest for people? Like you started to, say, if you just do something, talking to somebody. But
Yeah.
what is your go-to? What would you be your go-to to even?
I have learned what, again, like, and this is like the journey of an advocate, I guess, or journey, like my Ryan's journey, at least. Um, and I think I've heard this answer from other people. I would say, if find your empathy for others with those you agree with and disagree with. You've got to find empathy for yourself, but for others. If you don't have a sense of empathy, you have no business being an advocate. And I think we have seen a lot of people
Lose
who
their way.
lack empathy who get into this field, and we quickly realize it's not about us, it's about them, you know? And they're running an advocacy campaign based on them. And that's okay. But that I don't believe truly speaks to the values of what an advocate is. I always say, like, the first step for somebody is find your empathy. And once you have that sense of empathy, like, then you're ready for the next step. Because I feel like even storytelling, you've got to find some sense of empathy, right? To be able to be a good storyteller. And part of advocacy is being a storyteller. Like, that stories move people, right? They move people into action. And you know, I I've 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 had to find my own. I find my own empathy in, I wake up every morning and try to put myself in someone else's shoes. I get, phone calls from people sometimes, and I can feel like the rage of, like, oh my God, are they like again? I'm like, no, it's not again. Like, you are, like, you just be grateful to be of service right now, and like be able to like put yourself in that other person's position. And you can still have boundaries while being empathetic. That's the thing. Like, you can still be kind, and I've found it is the most important tool in this work. And I think that that's the first thing you've got to do.
I learned my first advocate job was first for me, right? Advocating for my own self and my needs and for my newborn, who is now 31 and the dad of triplets. I can't wait till you get to see them one day.
Yeah,
Um,
either.
but also teaching him how to advocate for himself when he went off to college. And I think that's what I think about my mentor who passed away during COVID, Art Woodard.
Art, yeah.
Always teach, do, repeat. Do we need to be doers, teachers, and right. We just have to keep repeating
You have
that.
to keep repeating. And some people have disagreed with me on this vehemently, and I understand why, because of the harm that is happening. I, though, have done like a mini social experiment, and we've talked about this, like mini social experiment with some people, and I realize, and I'm going to talk politics for a second. I'm going to talk about Trump, and Trump supporters. Um, Trump, MAGA, extreme MAGAs. I'm not talking about the politicians. I'm talking about the people on the ground who voted for the guy.
Or
Don't,
parties, I see. Mm-mm.
yeah, they don't show up like that though in a vacuum, right? Like this didn't just happen to them. And when I have been curious about who they are and why, I have found there is a deep, just like me, just like you, just like many of us, a deep unresolved trauma and experience within them, that is unresolved. And I can feel empathetic for that while still disagreeing and fighting against it, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Absolutely.
And and I have found that to be a good quality in doing this work and trying to and more effective for me to fight for the cause or against a cause than against a person who really holds no power other than their vote.
Absolutely. Oh my God, that was such a great ending to this conversation. I'm gonna definitely book you for another time next year.
I'd love to.
Absolutely, because there's just so much richness in what we're both talking about and how we're, even though there's times we're in separate directions. I remember the call to action during COVID, when we did online COVID for
Yeah.
the first time, and trying to bring folks that look like me, starting the Inclusivity Caucus. Again, that
Oh, yeah.
opened and broadened my view, and learning from others. And I believe that it's doers, learners, and teachers, right? And repeat, if I'm not open to learning about you, I don't have to accept everything. I don't have to agree upon everything,
Right.
but I do need to have that sense of respect and dignity, respect. If I want dignity and respect, I have to also provide it. But I also learned how to call you out when I need to
Right.
call you out, and I need to
Yeah.
call you forward,
Right.
and we've done that to each other. And I think that's what has bonded our relationship over these last years, and such respect and love that I have for you and for Sean. Sean,
Oh,
well,
likewise.
I miss
Yeah.
him, and I love everything. I got to get out to Vegas. It's
Well, we have a bedroom for you here, so you
I,
come anytime and we'll do the next podcast here at the house.
oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Decide whether I want to go to Vegas or I want to go to New Orleans for my 63rd birthday in February. So I
Hey,
figure that out. But I want to thank you, Ryan, for your honesty, for your passion, for your drive. And again, I want to thank everybody for listening today. And yay, you know what? If we're ever on the edge, come see Ryan, come see me. We are here for you. We will help you to advocate. We are here to show up and support you in any walk of your recovery, your whatever part of the world that you're in. Please, please, please reach out to someone,
Yeah.
especially during these holidays. Don't be alone. Again, I want to thank everyone. Thank you so much on Cruising on the Edge. I'm your host, Carol Cruz. Thank you so much.
Love you.
Love you. Mwah.